Okay, so in this video, let's talk about your thyroid antibody test that we commonly order to help us determine if you have an autoimmune process against the thyroid enzymes and proteins, or enzyme and protein that's commonly associated with Hashimoto's. Okay, so I want to go through a few things here. First of all, let's talk about the antibodies that are typically checked to see if you have autoimmunity against the gland or Hashimoto's. Now, technically, you do not have Hashimoto's, okay, if you're not also technically hypothyroid. So you have to have a lab high TSH and have been diagnosed as hypothyroid, plus have positive antibodies to either TPO or TGB, thyroid globulin. Okay, so you have antibodies against TPO, which is thyroid peroxidase, and or antibodies against thyroid globulin, and you have been diagnosed as hypothyroid with a lab high TSH, then technically that's Hashimoto's. Okay, that's Hashimoto's. If you you have normal thyroid hormone markers, TSH, T4, T3, whatever, your TSH is normal, but you have positive antibodies to either TPO or TGB, right, thyroid globulin, or thyroid peroxidase, then you have an autoimmune process that's active, but it's not considered, you don't call it Hashimoto's, okay? It's an autoimmune process against the thyroid, and if that autoimmune destruction continues, it may result in a high TSH because you have a decreased ability to produce your T4, and that could result in a lab high TSH and eventually become Hashimoto's. But it's an autoimmunity against the thyroid. Okay, so it's really important to understand. And when we're looking to see if someone has this an autoimmune process against their thyroid, and we're primarily looking at Hashimoto's. Now, there's also with Graves, you look at thyroid-stimulating immunoglobulins, or it's the Graves antibodies, and I don't run those very frequently because I don't see that population of people in my office, though I can tell you this, we have ordered it, especially when we suspect and we see symptoms of hyperthyroidism. But with Hashimoto's, it's not just low thyroid symptoms, it's a roller coaster of high and low, just due to the thyroid destruction that occurs with the autoimmune attacks. The cells of the thyroid get destroyed, some of them do, and they spill their contents, which is thyroid hormone, into the bloodstream, spiking levels, and that can cause hyper symptoms, anxiety, heart palpitations, and some other things. But you when you have one autoimmune condition, you're likely to have multiple autoimmune conditions, and it wouldn't be unreasonable for someone to have expanded autoimmunity or develop autoimmunity, and develop Graves. So we sometimes will order those antibodies, but most commonly in my practice and with the distance consulting patients I work with, or distance consulting clients, in-office patients, is that we're typically looking at TPO antibodies, which is an enzyme in the thyroid, and thyroid globulin antibodies, which is a protein, that are both used and required to manufacture your T4 and your T3, your primary thyroid hormones. So those are very valuable antibodies, and we order those for people routinely. And we've got it also. Right now, we offer getting those checked to people. We can get them for $20, and we will do that as a service just to help you get them checked. It does not establish like a doctor-patient relationship. We don't even I don't even talk to some of the people, but if we get results in, I do like to just have a phone conversation and see, if they're positive, just discuss it with you, and have a conversation and try to help answer some questions. But if you those are really important. Let's just say that, okay, 90% of cases of hypothyroidism are due to Hashimoto's, so it's really important that someone get those checked. Now, if those are negative, it doesn't mean you don't have Hashimoto's. Okay, if you get them checked and it's positive, and then in a year you get them rechecked and it's negative, it doesn't mean the Hashimoto's is gone. I want to be very clear about something. Autoimmunity is not curable. We don't know how to turn off the genes once they have been turned on and are expressed, and the immune system fluctuates. Okay, so your immune system fluctuates. So we could check your antibodies today and they'd be high, this morning, like in the morning, and then in the afternoon, check them again, and they might be low, and they might be below the lab value. So what does it mean? It means that in the morning they were high, in the afternoon they were low. The immune system fluctuates. Does it mean that you're not autoimmune? No, it doesn't mean you're not autoimmune, because we know the immune system doesn't work that way. When I see them high, it means that the process is turned on, and if I see them in there, it's low, it doesn't mean that it's turned off. It just means that they weren't high at that particular time. You can see people with suppressed white blood cells that don't have a lot of, that they don't have a lot of B cells because their total white blood cell count's lower. They may not produce enough antibodies to be detectable on the test. But that doesn't mean they don't have the process. There's a lot of people that are seronegative Hashimotos, so they actually have Hashimotos, but they don't have detectable levels of the antibodies, and they might never. But we know that that's the case because that they do have Hashimotos, because they can determine it with ultrasounds in some cases, because there are characteristic changes of the gland that occur. Due to the repeated immune destruction, it changes the way that it looks, the way that it feels. And then on top of that, if someone has their thyroidectomy and the thyroid's removed, they'll look through the thyroid, and they'll biopsy it and look at it all to see if they detect any cancer cells in a lot of cases. But they can also see characteristic changes associated with Hashimoto's when they've done a thyroidectomy. So we know that it occurs. So here's the thing, if the history looks, technically, here's what I think should occur. I think that you should be considered autoimmune if you're hypothyroid. You should be considered autoimmune until proven otherwise. You have a 90% chance. 90%. 9 out of 10 people. That's the primary reason. So in that case, it does change the way that I approach hypothyroidism, that I approach the symptoms, because the autoimmunity changes things quite a bit. So anyway, I'm digressing quite a bit here, talking about other things that can influence these findings and these markers. And the main thing I wanted you guys to know is that typically TPO antibodies are checked and thyroid globulin antibodies are checked. For Hashimoto's or for autoimmunity against the thyroid, you have to have lab high TSH at some point, plus positive TPO or thyroid globulin to be diagnosed with Hashimoto's. Otherwise, it's just an autoimmune process against the thyroid, which it's, they call it, or they'll call it euthyroid, where the labs are normal, but the antibody levels are high. So there's quite a few things that can be confusing. The main thing is, just because you don't have positive antibodies does not mean you don't have Hashimoto's. If you get them checked and they are high and they come down, it doesn't mean that it does not correlate with the autoimmune process getting better. It just means that the immune system, the antibody levels are fluctuating for whatever reason, but we don't have research that correlates lower antibodies with improvement of the autoimmune condition, because we could check them this morning, and they might be 3 or 4 times the lab range, and you check them in the afternoon and they're only like 1 time the lab range, or they're negative. Does that mean that your autoimmunity is better? No, it doesn't. It just means that they fluctuate, and that's how it works. So I think I've said enough about it, right? So anyway, if you guys if you have more questions about it, post below. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing, but those are very, very good lab tests. We get those for people quite often. Just want to share that with you. If you need any help or you have any questions, just let us know. But I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks.